community of fellow authors. And so the real thing to say, to begin, we're celebrating this book, and they make lovely presents, and this mic doesn't work, except to record us, so don't worry about that. But reading this, the work of the early years of Raven Chronicles was doing something for me that I thought I'd share with you. That, you know, in the moment, periodicals in the moment are doing a kind of taste test. They're dragging a net through the waters, and they're coming up with what's here now, and what's good about what's here now, and what's the best of what's here now. Well, we don't need to know what's the best, but this is as good as we could find in these first few years of this magazine. And then inside, just past the title page, there's a list. There's a list of people who are no longer with us, who were published in this issue. And it's roughly a third, maybe a little less than a third, but roughly. A bunch, 20 people, 20 names were no longer with us. And one of the things that we do when we write is we hope to outlast ourselves. We hope to reach beyond the confines of what increasingly looks like a little life. You know, we get a little handful of it, and we try to use it as best we can. Sometimes when we're young, we're dashing around trying to piss it away as fast as we can. Sometimes we're very reckless when we're young. We don't think we're going to make it. We think we're going to leave a pretty corpse. You know, that kind of stuff. But as you read this and read who's in there with you and who's in there around you, just consider that these, what an editor does is tries to give the work a hearing, a showing, a little life. Sometimes it doesn't work. And I know that as well as anybody. I've had a few published poems that I wished I'd never written. Or I realized that I wasn't quite able to do what I thought they were doing. And I remember, I can tell you now that I made a permanent enemy of somebody by asking if I could have that poem back after I read it, after it was accepted for a magazine. And the person said, I thought I was insulting them, insulting their taste, and I wasn't. I was humbling myself and saying, maybe that doesn't belong in the light of day. Anyway, we have business, and we're giving all these writers are somehow being given because they lit up the bingo for Phoebe and me and Kathleen.
And Stephanie.
And Stephanie. Oh yes, and Stephanie. Lit up the bingo for us. Woke something in us. They connected. They worked. And so that's what we're celebrating. Tonight we have 4 readers and me. And I'm Paul Hunter, your genial host. And I'm only humbly representing Phoebe Boucher and Stealing Light and the Raven Chronicles. I was, for the first few issues that came out, I was afraid to send them anything. I knew who these people were. I knew what they were about. And they've only gotten more that as they went on. They've only gotten better at it. And it's a magazine that I deeply honor. Our first reader this evening, after I do my thank yous, we have a bunch of people to thank. Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, King County Lodging Tax, Arts Washington, the Washington State Arts Commission with the NEA project support, and the Jack Straw Cultural Center, where we are. And thanks for all of those folks for supporting this reading and supporting the kind of work that we're selecting and purveying. Our first reader retired as a pilot from Alaska Airlines in 2009, and as an old busman, I can tell you that he went on the equivalent of a busman's holiday, because he's been working in Mumbai, India, London, England, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He's been everywhere, and he is now living in the desert and sketching rocks while his mind clears. He is a wonderful, wonderful poet. I'm not going to read all of the lovely things that are said about him, but I will tell you this. That his performance is so sweet and fine, so soaring. If you watch his chin go up as it reaches out over us. Bart Baxter. Please welcome Bart Baxter.
I was thinking earlier about some readings that you go to where you come and read, and you always have 2 or 3 people that say, gosh, I'm going to read. I hope you don't mind if I leave early, do you? I promise you, I'm not going to leave early. He had his heart set on shop rags and creosote, but his mother, God bless her, gave the boy an autographed football for Christmas. In the back by the lumber yard, there are scrap 2x4s and a piece of his undershirt where the chain link is torn, watching his work through the window in the back seat, breathing hard till the sky bubbles and bursts into flame. He leans back with his eyes closed and his fingers wet. Here's the scream of the night watchman locked in the building. And his mother, God bless her, smells the gas on his fingers. Asked the boy if he called the pretty girl who lives down the street. Maybe go to a movie, maybe go see a basketball game. But the boy wants to burn. By the time he was 7, on the 4th of July, when the fireworks went up, he was watching the flame from his lighter instead of the night sky. He was holding it next to his pink skin, watching blues and that nectarine color he sees in his sleep. He has dreamed of the little white house down the street, with the carport and shutters and trash at the stoop. He has dreamed of the pretty girl who lives in the little white house down the street. Spray the gas at the front door, spray the gas at the back door, light a small votive candle in the dark where the porch light is out. And the pretty girl living there half asleep in her room with her little stuffed animals and photos of Bon Jovi won't ever see the Mariners play or go to the movie, so he watches the TV, and the blonde on the 10 o'clock news shows him fire trucks and aid cars and first responders. There is peace for the arsonist in the night on the TV screen when embers and ashes fly, timber incinerates, and drywall collapses. When the door jams are jammed and the little girls suffocate, he can hear the small bodies of babies beginning to burn, smoking and blistering, sucking for air but not understanding the arsonist. Martin Luther was an arsonist that night in October when he nailed up the 95 Theses on the door of the castle church. He had kerosene, dirty rags, and a box full of matches, and his head nearly burst with the image of Calvary burning, the angels in agony, Pope Leo, the archbishops, Mary Immaculate, tied up in chains, and he nailed up the door so the cannons of Rome would ignite. Baby, he was an arsonist that night in October when he watched as the castle church went up in flames. Andy Kaufman was an arsonist the minute he stepped in the ring with the Amazon princess. He had torches at ringside and tar on the canvas, a tag team with flamethrowers mounted and armed at the turnbuckles, grease paint and gas fumes, that volatile mixture of genius and vandal. We burned his ass at the stake. With the witches and Christians with laughter and lighter fluid, I can see his eyes light up with sparks from the audience, the ones that he got to but never quite got it. He is holding his side, laughing, exploding in flames on the ropes in a stranglehold in the arms of the angels. Dr. Blassie Ford was an arsonist the minute she raised up her right hand and offered the truth. She had fire bombs and fuses. She had sulfur and sawdust, afraid of accelerants and magnesium memories she was happy to keep to herself, but her reticence burned like a river of fire through the dead wood and old undergrowth. I could see how the rats and the vermin ran, scared to the cool of the caucus room, caught up in lies. They were caught by the fire and the brimstone, so they burned in the spittle of the filthy and pitiful, and they burned to the marrow of their dirty little bones. She has brought in the B-52s, and her words fall like napalm on the floor of the Senate, where the pious and posers and hypocrites are holding their breath, didn't count on acetylene burning like jet fuel, and the room smells like diesel and death. They can't gavel away all the blaze and the carnage. The frat boy come justice is choked up and chained to his half-missing, half-hearted cock and bull story, and he whimpers and retches and waits for ignition. He has come to the fire, we have come to the fire, and we know it cannot be contained. There is peace for the arsonist when she carries a torch. There is peace for the arsonist when she asks for a light. There is peace for the arsonist when she lights up the castle church. There is peace for the arsonist working your neighborhood. There is peace for the arsonist tonight. Thank you for having me. 6 sonnets for the desert and you. A holy man is calling prayers in coach. My co-pilot is staring straight ahead. South Africa is on the missed approach, and I remember something that you said about me always getting into jams. I've got a llama calling coach to prayer and only 1,300 kilograms of fuel remaining. Rain, electric air, and hail with St. Elmo's fire coming down the windscreen. But I see you in the rock above the bighorn sheep, turning around to smile at me while ewes and yearlings walk behind so not to get the ram upset. This is the part I haven't worked out yet. I'm sitting in the right seat for a time, talking to Gander as we pass St. John's, watching the temps in case we need to climb. The North Atlantic in the winter spawns unreasonable fears of water. Lights seem alien from anything that's true, and I remember all the desert nights we watched our galaxy of stars. Some you had never seen before, and now the sun begins to rise along the cloudy coast of Northern Ireland. Many miles to run to London, and I think about you most in all the distances I know by heart. This is where the premise falls apart. At Baalbek, Christians tried to curb the cult of Venus. Hezbollah and Damascene and low-flying Israeli jets exult in their interdependence. In between the Syrian border and my hotel room, it's not much different than the heat and sand of Southern California. Soon enough, I guess we'll all be in the street. The Palestinians across the road with automatic weapons celebrate the end of Ramadan, and shells explode just 40 miles away. How can we wait much longer, love, to mount our own defense? This is the part that doesn't make much sense. In the Sudan, the desert isn't such an ally. The wind blows sand like powder packed into the engines overnight, and much is made of all abrasion. Rebel-backed militias hide beneath the sub-Saharan storms, and I sit sipping buka in my room, trying to understand the heavy arms coming from south of Juba to Khartoum. I think about the ocotillo flower, the brittle bush that you call daisy balls, the creosote and cholla, and the hour the sun begins to set over the waterfalls in Carrizo, the canyon hot and dry. And this is where I sometimes wonder why I'm in the Hotel Mikkels drinking beer with rowdy expats and their surly crews. There's been another fatal crash. And we're all wondering if there's going to be news around Harare. All I want to do is watch the dry lightning in Joshua Tree, the feathered grass and fescue, and then you moving along the fallen rock and screed, to watch you strong and steady in the wind. As we get older and our joints fail, our feet and backs and knees and shoulders tend to anguish, there you are along the trail, one footfall at a time, climbing away. And this is where I'm not sure what to say. I know we have a realistic sense of things, like how we need to plan ahead, to see our bodies in the future tense. But now I see us lying on the bed like teenagers, laughing, rolling our eyes, imagining our younger selves without incessant pain or constant compromise. The wind is coming up. The dust and drought are almost welcome if I'm here with you. And here we are indeed, more joyous than lizards on a rock, nothing to do but let the summer sun roll over us. God is the desert, and all we are is sand, and this is the part I finally understand. I'm going to finish with a poem about my grandmother and the New York Yankees. And I know the Yankees are not in the World Series, but I don't care. My grandmother Baxter, we called her Big Mama Nee, loved Billy Sunday and Billy Graham. She loved Uncle L.C. and Aunt Mary Lola, the lazy boy rocker, sweet corn on Monday, boiled okra, cold buttermilk, anything deep fat fried, and the old Motorola. She loved Jesus and God, hard work and loose sod, but more than anything else, my grandmother Baxter loved baseball. She loved Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese. She loved slow rollers, role players, hard sliding, and high cheese. She loved shutouts and pitchouts, switch hitters and rundowns, hackers, yackers, and the suicide squeeze, my lord. She loved Sandy Koufax. She loved Stan the Man and Willie Mays. She loved a light wind blowing out to center field on sunny days. She said, honey, it's better than love. I seen both, and baseball is better. But Big Mama Nee could be a hateful old woman. She hated crows in the sweet corn, rats in the meal, cockroaches, warm buttermilk, anything Republican, the devil, the Depression, and the Democrat New Deal. She hated sin, and she hated hell. She hated weak handshakes, lawyers, lame excuses, Oklahoma, and Howard Cosell. But most of all, more than anything else, my grandmother Baxter, Big Mama Nee, hated the goddamn New York Yankees. She hated Ralph Houck and Elston Howard, Phil Rizzuto and Billy Martin. She hated Phil Necro, Joe Necro, the Necro children, the Necro pets, anybody named Necro, anybody who'd ever known a Yankee, anybody who'd ever been to Yankee Stadium. She hated Allie Reynolds and Whitey Ford, Tony Kubak and Bucky Harris. She hated Lou Gehrig, Lefty Gomez, Mickey Mantle, and Roger Maris. She hated anyone, anywhere, anytime, who'd ever been in any fashion, in any way, associated with the New York Yankees, including my Aunt Marilee, whose hairdresser had a friend whose mother had been to New York a long time ago, but it might have been Boston. Until one afternoon when the day was profoundly hot. And a thunderstorm was coming up over Grayson County, and the deep low pressure was sucking all the air out of the bricks. The old swamp cooler was working, and the hole in the screen door was letting in flies, and the Red Sox were ahead of the Yankees with runners at the corners at the bottom of 6. When all of a sudden, without saying a word and without any warning, she jerked. She lay back in her chair, stiffened up, and her breathing got gravelly. Then her body stiffened up and her eyes rolled back in her head, and with one great shudder and moan, she just gave up the ghost, and I sat there and knew that, without any question, my grandmother Baxter was dead. Now, I'd never seen anyone die right in front of me. It was ugly and awful and not like on TV. And I wasn't sure what to do. I took her old wrinkled head in my hands and I cried. I saw the hard life and the sweet way she handled adversity. I could see the kindness and love for her neighbors and family, and I told her I'd miss her and brushed back her hair. I kissed her on the forehead as the strong smell of lilac perfume overcame me. She was more beautiful than I could imagine, the personification of gracious acceptance of life and its imperfections, and death with its promise of quiet, lasting peace. So I turned off the TV. She sat up and yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" And she snapped up so hard in the lazy boy rocker that the shock waves knocked over the porcelain figurine of Jesus on the chest of drawers so hard I fell back into the pile of crocheted Afghans and Reader's Digest and National Geographic. And said, "You turn that back on and get out of the way, you skinny, crooked-toothed little neurotic. Boston's got runners on first and third. They're going to pitch around Ted Williams. And I might have the palsy and I might have the gout, but don't you even imagine I might be dying one single inning before I find out if the New York Yankees get beat." And so I think of her sometimes when the weather turns warm, when the streetlights are buzzing like June bugs and there's something in the air that smells like baseball. And I carry her words till the last days of fall, not really caring who wins or who loses, who's throwing sliders and who's throwing heat. In the big game of life, all I care about now is whether the goddamn New York Yankees get beat.
Some people haven't. Was there anybody here who has never heard Bart read? Anybody here? See, there we go.
Yeah. Well, you got a treat tonight.
Yeah, you got a treat. Yeah, and I'm sorry. Apparently, I have mangled
Well, that's okay.
the order because we had 2 orders, and I was following the order that was printed larger.
Well, that was just alphabetical. That wasn't the order of the parents, but
Oops.
Well,
okay.
okay. Well, to clear the palate. Clear the palate. I'm going to read a piece that is in this.
Paul has 2 poems in there.
And this is called Executioner. And there may be at least one person here who doesn't know what a hippie is. And I'm not going to explain it. It's called Executioner. True story. We were hippies sitting there in a sweltering bar in the 60s in Mankato on a muddy little river the Sioux had swept down like a flash flood a century before, when a red-faced timber cruiser with his ball cap on backwards, 6'6", pot-bellied, belligerent, pulled up a seat and shouted in my ear how just that day he had surveyed and cut the last virgin walnut tree in all Minnesota. He said it had belonged to an old farmer who held out to his dying breath, but then his widow had been moved into a rest home while the kids went ahead and settled the estate because they had waited enough. And you couldn't believe a tree could grow that magnificent, reaching up and out from a trunk near 18 feet around, measuring 80,000 board feet, enough to make a dozen houses from the ground up out of pure walnut, if you could imagine what that might be worth. And you couldn't even tell how old it was because the heartwood was so black, the rings all ran together. And standing on that stump the size of a Cadillac, seeing the hole it felt like it left in the sky got to me for a minute. And while he swirls his beer to wash down the lump in his throat, I leaned close and asked why he couldn't leave it be. He says, I hear what you're saying. I hated cutting that tree. You think I don't have feelings, but you know business is business, and there's plenty more guys where I come from who fell and buck as soon as your back is turned without so much as a by your leave. So why shouldn't it be me doing what has to be done, not so much for the profit, but to keep off the butchers and see that the job is done right? And I think we'll proceed with the alphabet
Yeah, might
gods
as well.
because we've mussed them. Bart, you were supposed to be last, but I couldn't see for looking. Our next reader is going to get this beautiful award, which I'm going to read right here. Alicia Hokansen is a lifelong resident of the Pacific Northwest. She received her BA and MA from the University of Washington. She recently retired from a 40-year career teaching English, writing, and drama, mostly to middle school students. And let me tell you, it's work. That's called working for a living. You can look at her, she's right there, working for a living. I taught middle school kids a couple times, and it damn near killed me. 27 years were spent at Lakeside School in Seattle. In 2003, she was named the River of Words Poetry Teacher of the Year. She now devotes her time to writing, reading, tutoring, and political activism in Seattle and on Waldron Island. And Waldron Island is a wonderful place, partly because of her. But they have a bad anchorage, folks. Don't go there when the wind's blowing 30 or 40, because you'll drag ashore. Her first book, Mapping the Distance, was selected by Carolyn Kaiser for the King County Arts Commission Publication Prize in 1988. Two chapbooks, Phosphorus and Insistent in the Skin, were published by Brooding Heron Press and our fine friends on Waldron Island. Please welcome Alicia Hokansen.
To be here on this beautiful fall night, reading to such a sweet audience. Thank you for coming. The first poem is the poem that is in the anthology, and it's called "The Iceman," and it's about about Otzi, the Europe's oldest known natural human mummy, who was dug out of revealed out of a glacier in Switzerland in 1991. They believe he lived between the years 3400 and 3100 BCE. And the reason I know about the Iceman is because with my students, I watched a PBS documentary about him. A man older than the pyramids who walked the Alps before Buddha or Christ, before Aristotle or Plato. The Iceman. Taken by ice and given back, he came to us whole and we broke him, looking for our past, stashed in his woven bags and boots lined with grass, etched in a bow of yew or arrows of swift viburnum. Another gone down on the dark journey and returned with treasure, sloe berries ripe with autumn sun, news of places where the earth gives up its sharpest flint, or a meadow of curative mushrooms far up the mountainside. Did he pray to a goddess of snow or fire, to some Vulcan of copper who blessed his axe? As the storm overtook him, did he cry out for wife and daughter, weaving reeds for their roof by the lakeshore? Unburied by his tribe, unburnt, unhallowed, skin shriveled brown, his fingers curved with blackened nails, the crust around his hollowed eyes articulates a century's slow speech of glaciers, blue quiet of alpine skies. Behind his knees, the skin's tattooed with hexagrams for wildness and protection. Jumping ahead 5,000 years. This one is called In the Anthropocene, and I wrote it in the spring of 2018 in memory of Sam Hamill, who died that April. In the Anthropocene, winter doubles down on spring, slaps fists of rain against the marchers who take to cold streets and chant, their signs laminated against the damp. Some carry slogans written on umbrellas, science, not silence. In the march of ecocide, the small subtractions, one poet's death, loom larger in the scheme of things, where such a voice could wake us before we drown. In the great not knowing, there is only the learning, the path, the way. You brought those ancient poems across the centuries to show us our time and place, rain-filled mountains and rivers without end, part of a continuum we cannot rip, though we have tried. So obviously we're all attuned to the problems of the climate disaster, climate change that we're living through. And it seems like every time I open the paper or magazine, I come across some new image. This poem came out of a time when I had seen, I think it was a short film of this glacier that broke off in Antarctica and was roiling in the southern sea. And that was where the poem started, but as you can see, it goes in different places. This is the world we live in, one way or another. As morning slips its light between the blackout shades and the day moon floats above the fence, a gauzy shadow of itself, I rise to consciousness with the image of the calving glacier roiling and melting into a black sea. They say it was the size of Manhattan's Island, only taller and all at once. That loss portending what will soon become personal, political. Yesterday, through rain squalls and sunbites, we sped up the freeway after the rock recital. Our granddaughter, 9, in sequined black jeans, channeling Blondie. One way or another, I'm gonna getcha, getcha, getcha. Electric red guitar slung aside as she grabs the mic and pitches it to us. Later, reading Mowgli stories to her as she collapsed in my lap. Her sister, earbudded and screen glued, tells me, books now are boring. Rebellion is her current ploy against being second-born. And I see the coming world colliding already with our stunned allegiance to the known. One way or another, I'm gonna lose ya. I'm gonna give you the slip. The next couple poems are written in the past year. And this next one was written about a year ago, because we're just not that far past equinox, are we? And the epigraph is from Stanley Kunitz. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? This poem's in 3 parts. Gathering, 1. At equinox, the slant of light changes, but keeps its strict appointment, 7 to 7. Brilliant days still hooked to summer, come edged in cold, and shadows that cover half the beach. Fall raises the curtain on the losses to come, as crackled leaves curl along the grapevine, crumble into the flax and lithidora. The cats bat them across the withered lawn, where walking brings gold spiders down. And summer's toll keeps piling in my heart. My first lover dead from ALS, a dearest friend gutted by pain, gone by her own hand. My love 3 weeks adrift in hospital beds, our nation's fabric fraying at the edges. And now the doctors in their crisp shirts have said the radiation didn't work. The tumor grows, and soon our beloved uncle will need all our care to help him to the door. 2. Carrying her dead calf, the mother orca follows the pod, lifting the body up to trailing whaleboats, tourists, helicopters, to our sightseeing push, our engine clatter, our pollutants filling the water. She bears her calf for 16 days, for 1,000 miles, up into the human world, crying, this. She is our activist in grief and rage, carrying a dying planet on her rostrum. 3. September coals fall to ash in the creaking stove, and the days are measured out in chores. I've gathered 5 bins of apples to the press, 24 jars of cider canned, and still 1 tree so laden I can't pick them all myself. I've gathered, too, some sunsets, burning a fierce horizon, gathered in a full moon, washing squares of light across the floor, gathered morning fog in the clearing to store this forest silence for our darkening time. You may remember in January of 2019, we had a full eclipse of the blood wolf moon. It was quite dramatic. And so this poem partly depends upon that. And it again is in 3 sections, and it's called Eclipsed. 1. Australia, 1975. On a spring evening, coming home from a night at the pub with my teaching colleagues, I found, propelled to the porch light, some insect hatch, a twitching pile of pale brown scuts blocking the door, a mass still clinging to the screens. Inside, the kitchen floor was littered with hundreds of piled rinds. Took a broom and swept the rasp of their small, hard shells along the linoleum. The utter abundance of them, all in one evening, alive and perishing. Now the insects are disappearing. In Amsterdam, the naturalist notices the strange sensation of a June bike ride with no wings battering his glasses or stuck against his teeth, nothing to spit, but great blankness in the air. 2. Our friend, on her second round with chemo, has sent you a new book, making friends with death. The blur on the horizon, my uncle called it. I sleep, I cook. I can't summon the energy to clean the house, though I can try to do the kitchen. These tasks I do today for you, tomorrow I will do alone. The heart traffics in morning's dark, specific grief, this scratched plexiglass between the feelings and the fear. 3. Leaving the play, we watch this January night in a cloudless sky, the blood wolf moon ascend the dark above the theater, fully eclipsed, improbably red, suspended through rhymed winter branches. My partner, Michael Turnson, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer about a year ago, and in March we had a huge family reunion to celebrate his life. So he could be there. He called it his Tom Sawyer funeral. Reunion, Manzanita, Oregon. Ocean waves wash in without ceasing, curl and break, sunlit blue or grayed out in the rain. They collapse on themselves and dissolve in thin foam on the beach. It's easy to let them be background noise. Enjoy the wide view without really feeling their unrelenting pulse pummel the shore. In the goodbye bear hug from your dearest nephew, suddenly the tears press out. Why is it only in the kindness of others that this grief rises to the surface? A glance, a hand squeeze, that more than expected embrace from your young oncologist catches me out, and I am pulled into the undertow. In the sweetness of this gathering, your children and grandchildren, your siblings, your nephews, the whole root ball of ex-wives, half-brothers, near sisters, it seems no one but me shies away from a straight-on look at your coming death, though all week the sea has chanted it in my ear. Let's see, 2 more. Blueprint. I found that favorite photograph of you, your face shadowed against the plywood of a wall you've just raised. You lean against the studs, bare-chested, hammer in hand, jeans powdered with fresh sawdust, your bitterness dissolving in good work, in shaping something wholly new. This refuge carved out of time, out of fur and moss, in the clearing of an abandoned orchard. Agate light, eagle feather, sea breeze from the north, our house in sunlit woods. Those years of building were your therapy, jumble of tools after each day's work, my cleanup job. Now you tremble on your cane, but under this roof, we hold each other's histories, and the long bandage of your grief unwinds itself from the bone. And this one is for all of us in these days of impeachment.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Although this was written just right after the 2016 election, I think it still, unfortunately, holds some truth. In a blue state. After the contentious campaign, the multiple despairs, the rift down the middle of the map, angry polemics on the Facebook pages, free-floating anxiety and its sleepless nights, I read in today's paper that psychologists counsel self-care, try laughter, a long walk, a return to your art. Gather friends, play music, and turn off your devices. Find your way back to living in the local wonders. Autumn is still fanning gold flames in the gardens. Wax wings swerve and swoop before us, drunk on the abundance of the rowan's red berries. We step through the rain into the bright paths of maple and ginkgo, spreading rust and scarlet across the neighborhood streets. The bookstore fills the small white space with poets and their friends, a transforming music. And after, were the poems too sad, you ask? The world is too sad, I say, but you still need to tell it. As Emily left her packets tied with blue ribbon, and the lichens you studied in their chemical revolution sometimes take centuries to break the granite.
Good, okay. One of my heroes died a couple days ago, and his funeral is going to be tomorrow. Elijah Cumming, 1951 to 2019, and he said this summer, when a lot of people didn't know that he was going to die so soon. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how long I'll be here, but I'm here. I'm going to make the best of it. Elijah did.
The guy from L.A., the guy who wanted to do a play of mine a long time ago, said, "It's all right, you can go down, you can get dark, you can get all the way down. He says, but you gotta promise you'll bring us back up." How deep down? And this is my first job. I'm 15, I'm making $80 a month. And I got a little cabin to live in. And I'm working for this old farmer. This old farmer is 64. And has never had any children. Anyway, how deep down? And this one day, he says, we get into his 47 DeSoto, and we go over to a neighbor's house. And I said, "What are we doing?" He says, "We're digging a well." Before sunup in the damp air, there is room to swing the pick, break through the nest of roots, and hard pan like a slab. We work fast to punch in and be out of the sun before it's well up. 2 dry old men in overalls and a boy sweating like one. By the time we get to heavier going, there is no room, so in turn we work shovel, pry bar, post hole digger, and take it a bite at a time, making a neat round hole, trying to keep it straight, because who knows how deep down it'll want to get. Red, then yellow clay, then blue, straight down through fossil rock, straight into the mother. Breathing hard, but don't rush it. 1 man down at a time, the ladder lowered and pulled out, dampening now as it sinks like an outhouse in the swamp. 1 digs away while the others lean on their elbows and talk over the mouth. Endless old witching stories, willow, apple, or peach forks, or ells of thick copper wire, like the pair passed over this field that wobbled, hunted, then crossed on this exact spot. Reminiscing a kind of low music of cats swimming, then rabbits tree climbing, then old jokes, talk that steers clear of dry holes, careful not to kick dirt on the digger, helpless beneath them, who grunts at his handle and listens. Thunderheads in a cloud patch pass so bright it hurts to look up. Still in that airless dark with all those leathery whispers like swallows scissoring the biting insects of doubt. Now and then he sings out for the canvas bucket lowered on a rope to clear out underfoot, or calls for the water jug on a line through its finger loop. or the latter when he just can't stand that slippery, narrow feel and dank of being buried alive a moment longer, and lets one of the yarn spinners take a turn for old time's sake. Around noon, when the sun stabs 20 feet in, we knock off, sprawl under a tree for sandwiches, splash a little water on each other, and smear our clown makeup. But as soon as there is shade again, one eases in to dig for the last of it. And by sundown, hear underfoot that sucking sound that sends one after a lantern to lower for a look at how strong it's coming in, or how much more to dig for it. And planted at last, like a tripod around the hot, tired mouth, still in the afterglow of a tin cup, we draw out a muddy fistful of its cool, wet light, smack our lips, and pronounce it sweet. Anna Odessa Linzer, like the tort, as we say, like the tort, is the author of several award-winning novels, Ghost Dancing and A River Story, that was adapted into a two-person performance piece. Anna's home waters are the Salish Sea. Her childhood summers were spent along the beaches, and her life since has been lived along these same beaches. The beaches have washed up bits of stories, and like the people she has known, they have entered into her work. Home Waters, a trilogy of 3 novels, Blind Vigil, Dancing on Waters, and A River Story, was published as a limited edition by Marquand Editions, Seattle, publisher of handmade art books. Her stories, poems, and essays have been published in anthologies and literary magazines. She has been the chair of a PEN Awards panel and of a Northwest Native American conference. And she also binds books. And we talked about letterpress. Please welcome, would you, Anna Odessa Linzer.
I'm very happy to be here, very honored to be here. The first poem I'm going to read is from, wow, really early.
Yeah.
Really early. It was a chapbook.
Yeah.
Was it before the magazine?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, here we go. Oh, that's a little bit of shade there. The girl who always thought it was summer. It is winter. I am 5. There is snow on the ground and the whitewashed concrete garden wall where I sit under bare branches of the oak tree in the low sun of this cold day, legs crossed, young movie queen, Miss America wave, palm out, fan-like, and already practiced gesture. My mother's best friend Mary drives by, zooming down the narrow tree-lined 57th Street, going home in a shiny new 55 Chev wagon filled with groceries, an ancient cocker spaniel, a young collie, and more boys than I can count. Home, she calls my mother, because this is what she sees as she passes our small white house. A little girl in the snow in a swimsuit and a bathing cap, small bare feet. And from that winter on, it became story, following me in my growing up like a title on my spine, the girl who always thought it was summer. But what that story did not tell, and what only I knew, was the magic I slipped into when I found the pink ruffled flowers of summer folded far in the back corner of the smallest drawer of my painted chest, behind lace slips and white cotton panties, under wool sweaters, in that secret place between memory and promise that is always right this summer. Yet separated by days was another story, told in other tongues, a theater piece, a performance. It is still winter, I am still 5, but moving through the season so close to 6 now. I am dancing before the full-length hall mirror, same costume, but now in anklets, embroidered with tiny rosebuds, shuffle-stepping on the smooth, slippery surface of the polished wood floor, my eyes holding only myself in my reflection as I dance, twirling too quickly into summer, tumbling into the cold edge of black wrought iron telephone table, splitting lip, spilling blood, shedding tears. And all these seasons later, your lips find mine, and they touch the numbed, thin, jagged line of the scar and the tiny stitch marks that show only in the clear light of summer.
Love that piece.
First light. In the cove below the treehouse, there is a single spotted harbor seal, the only one in the bay, maybe in the world this morning. She slips beneath the water and flies just under the still surface. Diving deeper, she takes with her the rest of my day, leaving only her slender brushstroke of white light in the pewter gray dawn. Island apples. Cairns of gathered stone littered with rusted iron, fragments of long broken fence, the only signs of labor or care, litter the field of wild grasses and wild rose. Only the apple trees, heavy now with autumn's ripened fruit, rise full. Decades gone since boots or plow or pruners touched the ground or tree, neglected, abandoned. Yet each tree has found its own perfect, majestic form. Only sun, only rain, they circle each other, dancing in their wind-touched stillness through the seasons. We pick an apple, taste. Each bite a perfect Buddha present moment, only here, only now. And then the flash of red skin against white flesh in the low sun, all memory, all desire. Our woven blue and orange baskets full, dreaming into the warmth of winter's kitchen. Cookies that traveled tight-packed, cookies that traveled packed tight in the then square-cornered, clean postal box, now return dented, stained, tired from the jet-fueled flight south, the slow crawl north. It looked to have been kicked back up the long coast by steel-tipped logging boots. Chocolate cookies for granddaughters missed their mark of family. Patience is not a USPS virtue. Home, crumbled, slightly stale, almost unrecognizable, they sat in the back of the refrigerator, as if the clean, dark coolness could restore and make whole what could not be. As if the cool stainless steel box could contain my own misplaced sadness at missed connections. Ziploc opened, I spread the dried contents on the deck railing above the crash of waves echoing from yesterday's storm. Gulls and crows and jays, more than I can count. Branches, deck, railing, air full. Cookie party, just as I had imagined, but with a new guest list. Lost in Winter, 2019. As if a stone hitting winter's gray water, a splash of gray against gray concrete rises, then falls below, rises to brick and glass, and again falls to become red-breasted sapsucker, all black wings paint splattered white, below the orange into burgundy into Sunrise Head, and held in the corner of the window well I cannot reach, through metal gate and fence. And she looks at me. Both of us held in this foreign land of January's cold concrete, sharp angles and metallic noise. How did we find each other here in this treeless, cold place, and yet cannot save each other? Where are we? We find each other, eye to eye, her against the wall, wings spread as if in a plea to me, until I feel feathered words rise in my throat to fly through the cavernous space between us. Then I turn away, her image burned through my eyes to my heart. So suddenly disoriented, some unseen magnet cold against the only compass I have, and I see that I too am lost now, in the place of my birth, a city I no longer recognize, in a country I no longer know. What thin watery membrane broke this morning to toss us each, bird and me, from our forest perch into this dark gray concrete? Close enough to the water to feel and hear the heartbeat of waves against the rock, I take in the change of season along the wooded path as if taking in a breath. And I just breathe it all in, sound and splash of color and smell and slant of light and texture, a familiar world that has changed everything and nothing. The world, too, is just breathing. It is as if fall is the lover I have been waiting for all these days, and I lean into the musky, earthy smell of his neck, breathe it in, remember. And yet it is not memory. The warm flush of it is next to my flesh, in my nostrils, on my fingertips. And then, startled by the crack of the branch, I feel the forest quicken, and so suddenly push out a buck just feet from me. Head erect, he stops, eyes me, tilts his rack toward me, considers, then leaps. And it is only then, in the leaping away, that I see what I had missed, the sheen of his last week in velvet antlers, buffed to ivory by branch and bark in anticipation, following the awakening itch of the season. It is his season within the season that pulls me away from quiet thoughts of fires in the wood stove, books to read, soup to make, knitting to cast on. Instead, I feel the fire and heat and the full thrust of his rise from his days of slumber in shaded summer grasses. My breath catches, and it is tango music, the click of high heels against the wood floor, the heady smell of perfume and sweat that carries me the rest of the way down the trail to the sandy cove, littered with salty kelp and drift. I am dizzy now with the rush and rise of this season I thought I knew. Okay, the troubles. Like unruly, hungry children, the troubles are kicking my shins, screaming, throwing broken toys on the floor, and at me, exhausted, I gather the troubles up, wrestle on threadbare coats, mud-crusted rubber boots, and pull them, flailing against me, out the door. Snotty nose, sniffling, hiccuping, scratching at my jacket, biting, kicking. And down the hill, through the woods, I carry the heavy, wiggling bundle, seeing little as I balance my burden. We all spill out on the beach, blinking in the spring light, jumping off the water. Then, as if by magic, conjured from desire, 12 young eagles are suddenly there, like giant, prehistoric, mottled gray and brown moths flapping towards the sun, held on the water's surface. and just as suddenly the sky blooms 2 adult eagles, as if in a perfect choreographed dance of control and passion. The teachers in a dancing, diving, fishing school for young, reckless eagles. Some fall full from the sky into the waves, others screaming their distress, circling, circling. Only then do the troubles hiccup once, twice, sniffle, quiet. We watch, our hearts stitched into the twirling fabric of the circle. Then just as suddenly, feathers and dance and birds are gone. Feeling the warm sand at my bare feet, I look down as if on cue to see the black culo from an ancient water and sand-pocked bottle. Thickness slumped by time, by waiting for me to look down, to find the black broken bottle end twirled in marbled, inky, watery blueness, rising from some deep grave, held away these decades, these centuries. Fingering the sandy black culo in the pocket of my sun-faded black leather jacket, I step into the darkness of fir and cedar forest. Trillions of bleeding hearts lighting the path like blinking lights on the floor of a gunmetal plane in an emergency landing. I step out of the path, back to the dirt road to return to the beginning, only then to see the seated, steaming bear scat at the opening of our clearing. I touch the tiny silver bear on the chain around my neck, a gift of love, and the troubles sigh and fall into a deep slumber, dreaming us all into the evening, their soft downy cheeks against my skin, their breath, whispered heartbeat of music in my ear. Okay, this is the last. Swimming lessons. So dark is this cold season that even the candles were lit between us this morning as we shared warm toast and strawberry jam and drank a hot tea of hibiscus flowers and ginger and lemon, soaking in this midwinter meal the taste of other seasons. And I watched your face, your eyes, your lips, as you told me that the dark side of this full moon was pulling you away again, and that you would be gone by the time the moon had fallen into the stillness of solstice. All day I kept close to the fire, inside the circle of its heat, and like the light I followed winter's grace, asking little, giving little, holding the pale beauty of the day in my mouth like a green tea. I watched myself swim through the winter light, a light that stayed in morning until suddenly it slipped softly into evening and was gone. It was almost midnight when I followed your taillights out the drive and walked alone to the dock. It was there that I felt the pull of the moon on the tide, on me, on my heart, already so pulled by the ebb and flow of your coming and going, the nightly stretch of cold, barren sand, leaving me exposed, gasping for breath. And just below me, below the dock, a quarter-mile from shore, where low tide sand meets the water, water that I swim in every season of the year, I saw a dancing path of ripples, a circle of broken moons. Deeper under the waves was a still patch of white. My mind quickly raced through fish and fowl as I emptied my pockets of tarnished pennies and beach glass, tossing them one by one to frighten away the living, until it became the heavy stillness that I followed, becoming suspended, finding her, the woman whose plane 3 days earlier had fallen from the sky, from a perfect pale winter sky into water so deep that even an army of helicopters and searchlights could not penetrate its darkness. Don't they know that some of us only reveal our death by moonlight? My pocket's empty now. I held the last penny in my hand, watching, imagining how the white blouse was ballooning so full in the tide, holding her there to this place she fell into, but cannot now fall from, held, floating. It was the yellow of the sun's light that caught and reflected the brilliance of another moment, seasons and years ago in the heat of summer on this same beach. I was young, just 13, but already the swimming teacher, teaching the children to swim in the water by the dock. A small gold box, so perfectly square, sat in the tide pool in the sand, far from the rocky shore, on the lowest tide of the year, just feet from the drop-off. Where the world so suddenly, so quickly, drops into the depths of the bay. I can only imagine the flash and hardness of diamonds, the blood red of rubies in such a box, so foreign on this beach of broken drift and kelp and gray stones. My breath caught as I kneeled to open it, pulling aside thick white cotton, heavy with salt water, and I lifted to my hands what only in my palms began to take form. Finger bones, teeth, a dusty powder of gray ash clinging to my damp flesh. In the bottom of the box was a white card bearing black typed words, a woman's name, a date, and other neatly spaced words at once too intimate and too coldly factual for my young eyes. Turning to leave, to begin my walk home through winter's moonlight, I threw the last penny, warmed now from my hand. But it was only when I slipped into the steaming pleasure of a hot bath by candlelight that I let myself remember, let myself become the young girl who was thrown from the dock years before when my own sons were still babies. It was winter, cold and clear and moonlit like this night, and I, like the rest of the little town, was sleeping under the heavy, warm weight of wool blankets and dreams. But she, barely 13, too young to be out at that hour, even in the sweet perfume of a summer night, was carried across the ferry, locked in the trunk of a madman's car. Even with my own flesh reddening in the hot water of my bath, the door had opened, and I could feel the ice-cold wind of that night and her, raped and thrown into the water, raped and bleeding, she was taken to the end of the dock, a quarter-mile from shore, and thrown into the water far below. Not even the splash of waves on the pilings would have drowned out the sound of his raspy breathing as he waited for her own young lungs to fill with cold, salt water. How many lifetimes passed until she knew he had heard death's silence? And she listened to his footsteps as he walked up the long dock to his warm car, where his headlights cast a small circle of light into the darkness in a twisted flash of hope as he drove away. I stared into the yellow of the candle's flame to taste the blood and follow the heat of its trail in the incoming tide, in water I know is so cold that it pierces flesh as deeply as the sharpened steel of knife blades. And I fixed my eyes on the single light on the shore, the light in the bedroom of an elder woman, alone in her insomnia and her dreams. And it too becomes the story of how I begin to remember how to swim like that young girl, the long cold distance through death, and emerge wet and naked and numbed, seeking, as I seek to be, a light in the window of a home where the words, "Please help," even through the silence of frozen lungs, will be heard. Where a warm blanket, a cup of hot tea come before questions. Remembering what I had never known, I fall into bed, into waiting, into the turning circle of water and light, feeling them both in the pulsing in my veins, dreaming them into the grace of breath.
Our next reader, our final reader, I had long admired from afar. She's a visual and literary artist. Her poems have been published in the African American Review, Alex Journal, Make It True, Poems from Cascadia, Cimarron Review, Obsidian 3, the Seattle Review, Raven Chronicles, Beyond the Frontier, African American Poetry for the 21st Century, the Journal, Book Club of Washington, Pilgrimage, Uncommon Waters, Women Write About Fishing, and Seattle Poets and Photographers, a Millennium Reflection. And online in Ratapalex, Innovative Northwest Poets, and Torch. She is involved in the Seattle Public Library, one of the great library systems. And I shouldn't say anything else except to say that when I came to the piece, when I was reading for this book, I came to the piece that's in here of hers. I suddenly was jolted in that kind of way that you're jolted by writing that I thought I'd read it, except I couldn't tell whether it was a poem or a story. I couldn't tell what it was. I couldn't even tell what it was. I said, I know this piece, and it deserves to live. And that's where I started this evening, and please welcome Carletta Carrington Wilson.
Thank you, Paul. I'm very happy to be here. I am always grateful to Raven, to Phoebe, for their support of my work.
We
And
love
you're
you.
right.
Love you.
And you're right, I don't know what it is either. I thought it was a nonfiction case, but, or fiction. Okay. So, we're gonna be in the 18th century. This is a series of letters, and actually, it's really not gonna follow exactly, it's gonna be more than 15 minutes, so I've sort of broken it up, and hopefully it will be coherent to you. It's called Iconography of the Slain. Sunday, 23rd May, 1751. Oh, I must say, it takes place on a ship that is transporting slaves. All traces of shore have disappeared. The wind blows from the east. A dampness has settled into my clothes. Today, I insisted I keep her in my cabin. Captain Davenport stared incredulously, protested heartily, then abruptly took leave. Ever since I went down among them, I failed to sleep. Air thicker than that which engulfed me on the coast burned within the hold. They stretched like the shadow of some putrid black river from end to end, twisting towards me, straining against the irons with barely enough strength to breathe. They raised themselves and glared as we removed the dead. Every liquid contained within the bounds of human flesh comes coursing out. We were helpless to stop it. Some deliver their own final blow by willing themselves dead. So the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness in the heat of my spirit. But the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. Ezekiel 3:14. Let me start again, from the beginning. Each time I begin again, I discover something new. One small gem illuminates my memory. Who else can I speak to this but you? Remember when I spoke to you that fated night? We were walking through a tunnel of fog. The air was chandeliered with a chill that even you noticed. With unaccustomed fervor, I announced, no, confessed, that I felt I was being called. We were just returning from the meeting of the society. It was our third meeting, was it not? But this night, it was pressed upon me to go to visit my uncle in South Carolina to view the Negroes firsthand. With your blessings, with the support of the society, I embarked, hopeful, reassured in the righteousness of my mission. When I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, and thou givest him not warning, nor speakest to warn the wicked from his wicked way, to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thy hand. Ezekiel 4:18. My uncle, Robert B. Davis, received me cautiously. After so many years in America, I found him changed. He was unlike the man my mother spoke so fondly of on so many Liverpool nights. My uncle would not give me license to preach among his Negroes. In every manner was I thwarted. Uncle, as well as the other planters, said they saw no need for the word of God to be spread among their slaves. How can roots without souls be in need of redemption? They countered. It was placed upon my heart to journey to Africa. What a perfect solution. If we could ship slaves across the sea, why not leave their heathenism in Africa and ship Christians, disembarked souls bathed in the baptism of Christ from sea to sea? Thou shalt know also that thy seed shall be great, and thy offspring as the grass of the earth. Job 5:25. All I asked was that they grant me the opportunity to speak of the redemption of Christ. If possible, perhaps, I may perform the baptism for those who are called. The governor said he would not stand in my way, but the traders would not tolerate any interference with their business. They are not at cross purposes with me, I informed him. They must come to the fort, do they not? And are held here, yes. With the aid of an interpreter, I could begin to go among them. Besides, there are gramentos, traders, mulattoes, sailors, factors, and captains who also can benefit from the Lord's work. And when I lie down, I say, when shall I arise and the night be gone? And I am full of tossing, and I am full of tossing to and fro unto the dawning of the day. Job 9:4. May 26, 1751. I did not know they captured her. She was standing near the women and children, staring into the sea. When I caught her eye, she turned away from me. Immediately, I raced to cover her nakedness with my shirt. She is young and delicate as a rose before bloom, this child, in who I see a becoming woman. I named her Sala. 28 May. I first saw her during an evening when I was visiting the mulatto merchant, Jacob Moore, a man of much repute among the natives and our men in the trade. I had just finished saying that I would, if necessary, present my case to the governor if we could not come to some agreement alone. Weary of me, he lapsed into a stubborn silence. I took the opportunity to examine his room, my eye becoming accustomed to the dimness. He had fashioned his abode in the manner of an Englishman. That he had once traveled to England was clear. It is then I notice someone standing in the shadows by the door. The setting sun fringed and framed the figure. Even so, I could not take my eyes off of her flesh, it being nearly the blue-black of the prized indigo cloth. They were children of fools, yea, children of base men. They were viler than the earth. Job 38. 10 June. Yesterday, cutting the water, I spied 5 or 6 sharks. The sun was working its way above the ship, and air enraged with heat. Not one bird flew in the sky. I spied a black shouting at the men, "Me favorite fella, favorite fella." Swearing, the men told him to shove off, but he seemed determined to make his point. Finally, Captain Davenport, carrying irons, came upon them. The man hurried off. Strangely, he is the only black the captain permits to move about freely. Earlier today, I saw him, curiously, demanding food for his slaves. I believe he was in league with Jacob Moore. Still, I haven't figured out the relationship between the captain and the African. Why, of all the men's slaves, is he allowed to move about like he is free? The men call Captain Davenport Dead-Eye behind his back. According to the men, he lost sight in one eye to a disease which afflicts the Negroes. It remains in the same position no matter what the other eye may do. I imagine that it is fixed upon some unseen face or object. In fact, the eye reminds me of the eyes of one of our men who died on the coast. Revulsion and defiance are words that come to mind, but even they are not sufficient. I do not wish to see what that poor man saw upon his death. Half the cargo of this harvester of death barely rests among the living. The other half clearly already belonged to the dead. The men say that the captain's sightlessness gives him the uncanny ability to pluck the dead, the near dead, from among the living. So it is with us. The men and I move about the ship, performing tasks of the living, but when we rest our heads, we fall back upon cold, hard beds, not confident that we shall awake. Forgive me, my dear, my black moon. Days weigh upon me. I am uneasy, restless, and unsure. Nights are endless trials of fitful sleeping. taken to tying Solemn in the corner of my cabin with a thick rope. I know, but trust me, my dear, it is for the best that I do so. Still I sleep, dreamless, feeling as if someone is standing over me, watching. I am poured out like water, and all of my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaveth to my jaws. And thou hast brought me into the dust of death. Psalms 22, 14, 15. Wednesday, 16 June. Today, the girls and women were made to dance on the deck. The men were made to drive. Our men pursued the females mercilessly. I spoke to Captain Davenport to no avail. Arguments erupted over them. The men conducted themselves shamelessly. Fights broke out. I checked to make sure Solemn was secure. I found her huddled in her corner, clutching her shirt. Thank you.
I'm going to finish with several small pieces. One night of my life, I split a bottle of whiskey with Kurt Vonnegut. And at that point, he told me he was writing. I had read everything he'd written that was published up at this point. It was about 1969. That is. And he said, I'm writing post-TV writing. He says, I've gotten to the point where I have to make things small because I don't think anybody will finish them. You know, and everything, and so he says that after every paragraph, it's like I start the whole thing all over. And his last half a dozen books were written that way, post-TV writing. So, well, I guess 5 years now ago, I started writing I thought it was going to be an autobiography. Well, it is, but it's not. And I finally got this idea from the idea of the word clown in English in its first incarnation, and for the first 150 years, it meant a country bumpkin. The clown is from the root for the word clod or clot, a lump of dirt. And a clown in Shakespeare is always a country rube who comes to town and gets fleeced and laughed at and taken advantage of and sold a pile of crap. The old clown felt for a world weathering the violence of global climate change. Furious and endless winter storms, high water, hurricanes, wind and hail and ice storms, tornadoes, mudslides, flash floods, scorching droughts that lasted years. And what else? Earthquakes and tsunamis like the ones that shattered Port-au-Prince, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Fukushima. But what could be done? In the dead of night, when dark thoughts troubled his rest, his first wish was for a future that built better, built stronger, without cavalier makeshift construction pretending the bottom line was not lives, but economics. Not to build and live on coastal lowlands, on alluvial floodplains, which was easy to say, hard to do. Mostly it was not even being said, but why bother building a school or town hall in Tornado Alley that could be blown away? He remembered what a sailing friend told him they did when typhoons hit Samoa. Everyone knew to head for high ground, hug the base of a tree, and pray to the Earth Mother. Have this picked out. 3 18-wheelers were playing grab-ass tag down the mountain through light sprinkles, heading west into Cheyenne. The old clown in the right lane doing 60 saw them coming in the rear view round a bend. 2 neck and neck strained to catch the one ahead. All 3 wide open, and there he was humming along in his blue tea kettle with a rocky meridian and steep drop off to the right that left no running room. Then doing 80 or 90, they were on him. The leader by in a flash, then the other 2 on his bumper split apart, one taking the rumble strip down the clown's right, the other down his left, the tunnel of the 2 tight enough to brush wingtips. No point calling troopers, no spotting the tags on their rigs, red and black and blue. In a heartbeat they tore past. Yet he was calm. He knew the madcap thrill of law-breaking, had to admire this brush with the reaper, where a tap on the brakes by anyone meant a fishtail avalanche. Just little things. And then we're just going to go to the end. It has to end in a death. There have been several deaths this evening. And this is borrowed from a friend. All the pieces in here, if they're in italics, they're fiction. If they're in Roman, they're true. This is in italics. But it's only borrowed from a very dear friend. The old clown knew he was dying, no fooling. Every day he appeared more clownish, ragged, inept. Didn't need any more makeup, why bother? Owned the frown he worked, why paint one on? Or the eyebrows, Twin Peaks of astonishment. When asked for a urine sample, he pulled his old gag of filling it with apple juice when the nurse wasn't looking, so when she came back, he could hold it up to the light, say, looks a little cloudy. Think I'll run it through again, pop the lid and chug it. For a while there, every little thing he did or said seemed worth a laugh, though his face felt frozen. His cheeks sagged to his knees by the weight of the life he had swallowed. That last day, when they asked what he wanted, he couldn't decide between Jell-O and a milkshake, so they brought him both. And while both sat by his elbow and melted, sweated rings into the nightstand, he dozed his final minutes, off and on, waking just in time for the finale. In the light, failing as it reached for him, he heard ducks and chickens feeding that might have been only the nurse's brand new shoes. Thank you.